Good evening, and thanks for joining us for these Newnan-Coweta Chamber of Commerce forums for the partisan primaries going on here in 2024 and coming up on May 21st. Tonight's forums are hosted by the Newnan-Coweta Chamber of Commerce, and we thank our advocacy sponsor, AT&T. I'm joined by Clay Neely, just to my right. I'm Dean Jackson, and we're going to serve as moderators this evening on behalf of the Chamber. And this forum that we're at right now features candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives, Georgia District 3 Republican primary. That's coming up on May 21st, with early voting being held April 29th through May 17th. This district centers on western Georgia broadly, including Coweta County, and the winner of this contest will go on in November to face a Democratic nominee, both of them vying to replace the retiring Representative Drew Ferguson. Thank you all. We have 4 people who have joined us tonight of the 5 candidates who are in this year's Republican primary, and they are Mike Crane, Mike Dugan, Brian Jack, and Philip Singleton, and Jim Bennett, who is a 5th candidate, is under the weather and could not be with us tonight. But 4 of you, we appreciate you coming out tonight to share your views in this important race. Give you a little bit of a preamble and a little bit of the rules of the game for our forum tonight. Our forum is intended to give voters an opportunity to hear of the views of these candidates on issues faced by the communities represented within this district in the state of Georgia and, of course, the United States as a whole. The Chamber of Commerce is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse candidates for office. Questions have been submitted by Chamber members and apply equally to all of our candidates here tonight. We ask that our guests at tonight's forum also respect that neutrality by refraining from any demonstration for or against any of our candidates. We ask that you hold your applause or any show of support or of opposition during our forum. This occasion is meant to give our candidates a chance to speak for themselves as they seek election. This forum's format allows each of our candidates a 2-minute opening and 2-minute closing statement. Our candidates are going to then have up to 1 minute to respond to a series of questions in between those openings and those closings. After the second candidate gives his answer to a question, a 30-second rebuttal will be allowed. If the first candidate chooses, candidates will be signaled when they have about 10 or 15 seconds remaining and may finish their sentence when their time is up. We're also going to alternate who goes first on each question, so we'll be able to stagger throughout the night. Again, thank you to all 4 of you for joining us and for choosing to run in this important election. We're going to begin now with our opening statements. And Mike Crane, we'll turn to you first. Tell us a little bit about yourself personally and professionally and why you are running for U.S. Congress.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to be here. Thank you to the students for this great production activity you're doing. I know this is great training for you. We thank you for your efforts. I'm Mike Crane, and I'm running for Congress here in the 3rd District. And 41 years ago, when my wife Tracy and I met at Georgia Tech, we weren't sure at the time, but we knew eventually we'd come home to what is Coweta County. And we made this our home, and we've been here for over 35 years, building things all over the district and all over the county. As a general contractor and a realtor, we have spent all our time here building things that last, whether it be homes, fire stations, restaurants, places of worship. That's what I've done for a living, and I've done that ever since my young days, even before starting at Georgia Tech. All this time while we've been building here and calling this place home, the federal government has been working actively against us and making it very difficult as a small business owner to be successful. They interfere with the marketplace. They interfere with just the bureaucratic regulation is just so heavy, especially in my industry, that it becomes difficult to be successful. Years ago, when I got to serve in the Georgia Senate, and it was one of the great opportunities of my life. And during that time in the Georgia Senate, I became one of the most conservative, was recognized as the most conservative senator in modern Georgia history. So tonight we'll go through and get to know each other a little bit better. I look forward to the questions. Again, I'm Mike Crane, running for Congress here in the 3rd District. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Michael Dugan, your opening statement, sir.
Thank you. Before I get started, Jim, if you're listening tonight, get better, buddy. We miss you up here. I am Mike Dugan, and I'm running for Congress. I'm an Army Ranger, a businessman, and a legislator. But I'm also a husband, a father, and a grandfather. When I was in the military, I learned a lot about leadership. Things that I learned, if you're a leader, you have to make hard decisions, and you own those decisions, and you share them with everybody else so they know what you've done. I learned in the military that the leaders work for the soldiers, not the other way around. Your elected leaders should also work for their constituents, not count on the constituents working for their elected officials. I learned that leaders eat last because you're the only one that can make a difference, and by eating last, you see if there's a problem. And I also learned that no matter how good a leader is, there's going to be a time where that leader makes a mistake. And that leader has to stand up, own that mistake, learn from that mistake, and never do it again. Now, I took those leadership traits to the state Senate while I was there. 4 of those years that I was in the state Senate, I served as the majority leader. We got major legislation, some of it controversial, some of it not. You wanted your income taxes decreased? We decreased it 3 times and then still returned you an additional $2 billion because that money is yours. You said that you wanted to protect your family and your property. We passed constitutional carry. A lot of people in this district said they wanted to preserve the sanctity of life. We passed the heartbeat bill. And most of all, you said you wanted election security. We passed the most stringent election security bill in the nation, and I wrote it. So I'm asking you, if you vote for me, I promise that I will always let you know where I stand, that you will always be able to get in touch with me, and I will always be a congressman that you're proud of. I'm looking for your vote on May 21st. Go to votemikedugan.com to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dugan. Mr. Jack.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come here and visit with you all tonight. My name is Brian Jack. I'm from Peachtree City, Georgia, and I've spent the last 8 years of my life working for the greatest president of our lifetimes, President Donald J. Trump. But my journey began at Peachtree City Hall. I went to Woodward Academy and then Pepperdine University of Churches of Christ School, and while there, every summer I came back and worked in my hometown community, trying to do what I could to serve the people of Peachtree City. I started off working at the Planning Commission, then later for the mayor's office, and I learned at that most local level, you have to have accountability in government. Government has to be accountable to the voters, to people they represent. You need more accountability in government. I spent 4 years working to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship after graduating from school. I worked for a year for Dr. Ben Carson, and then in 2016, I was eating dinner at La Paria in Newnan when I got that phone call from President Trump's campaign saying, Brian, you need to sign an NDA because we're about to announce you're hired onto the campaign. So I rushed across the parking lot to pack mail, signed my NDA, and joined President Trump's campaign. I was privileged and honored to serve within his White House from the first to last day of his administration. And I worked directly with President Trump to secure our border. I helped him find border wall funding. It wasn't easy to do. It was often hard to ascertain, but at the end of the day, we got it done. I worked with President Trump in 2017 to pass the largest tax cuts in America's history, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Our next Congress absolutely needs to extend the Trump tax cuts. They expire in 2025. It's of imperative importance. And working together, we unleashed our economy across our country by deregulating. We did everything we possibly could to enable small business to thrive. And I am so excited to visit with you all tonight. And we've got some great candidates on the stage. And with my 10 seconds left, I will yield to Mr. Singleton.
Thank you, Mr. Jack. Mr. Singleton.
My name is Philip Singleton. I'm an American soldier and conservative warrior. I grew up in Fayette County. I met my wife Julie in middle school at Grace Evangelical Church. We just had our 21st anniversary on Sunday, and we have 4 beautiful children, Timothy, Denver, Tyler, and Emma. I spent my entire life serving our country. That's what I've done from a very young age. September 11th happened when I was a sophomore in college, and 9 days later I joined the Army. I was pre-med at the time, but I remember feeling called to go serve. I felt our nation was under attack, and so I answered the call. And I've spent my entire adult life since then serving our country and fighting for freedom and liberty. Served in the Army. My last tour in the Army was, I got out of the Army in Korea in 2017. I moved home with my wife and our kids to Coweta County, where we're from, and I still felt called to serve. I felt like my service wasn't complete. So I took an unusual path and decided to run for public office. I felt like God was calling me to serve. I felt like we needed more men and women of character in office that would just do the things they said they'd do on the campaign trail. I felt like there was a lot missing. So I joined the State House, and I did what I said I was going to do, and I continued to fight for conservative principles, and I championed things like Save Girls Sports, writing that first bill in 2019, Georgia's Anti-Sanctuary City Act, promoting school choice, and the things that we campaigned on. For my efforts, I was often ostracized by leadership at the state capitol in Atlanta, and I was drawn out of my district in 2022 as the only Republican drawn out of his district by the Republican speaker. And we knew that there was going to be repercussions. So I've been willing to fight on the battlefield for limited government and for liberty and freedom, and I've been willing to fight in the legislature, and that's what I'll always do as an American soldier and as a warrior for the Constitution. I'll serve the country. And you can check me out at singletonforcongress.com, and it'd be an honor to have a chance to serve you.
Thank you, Mr. Singleton.
Thank you. Gentlemen, our first question tonight is about the institution you are running to serve in and what sort of Congress you expect to serve in. It is a very closely divided House, and if elected, what sort of congressional dynamic do you expect to serve in? Do you see a way beyond the deadlock and beyond your party broadly? Do you expect to gain a caucus in around the House?
You're going to need to say that whole question
Here we
again.
go. If elected, what sort of congressional dynamic do you need?
I got you.
All right.
Do I think that there's a strong possibility that the House of Representatives is going to be chaotic when you first get there? Unless something's changed in the last 100 years, yes, I do. One of the differences is now we're really, really good at identifying problems in D.C., not good at all at identifying solutions, and not working hard enough to get to those solutions. So that's the background that I bring to this race. That's whether the military career or my career in construction or my career in the legislature. It's the ability to see complex issues, find solutions, and build cohesion so that we can actually deliver on the promises that we make when we're sitting at one of these venues for the 6 months or whatever it is leading up to Election Day.
I'll roll it out. If elected, what sort of congressional dynamic do you expect to serve in?
Well, first and foremost, I'll note that I've spent much of my adult life working to elect Republicans to office and doing everything I can and could to facilitate a Republican Congress. To your point, we, beginning this Congress, had a 5-seat majority. It's now dwindled with some resignations. I fully expect President Trump to be elected our 47th president. I fully expect a Republican Congress to follow him and follow suit. But I've got a record of experience for 4 years working in President Trump's White House as his liaison to Capitol Hill. I worked directly with him to pass tax cuts for our country. I worked directly with him to appoint and confirm conservative, not just justices on our Supreme Court, but also judges, over 300 judges, and I worked with him to ensure that we deregulated. We did everything we could to cut through red tape and the bureaucracy. You've got to look at records of accomplishment and experience. I worked with him for 4 years across the party, from the most moderate members of the Republican Party to the most conservative members of the Republican Party, to enact his America First agenda. Thank you.
Mr. Singleton.
There's hope. There's hope in Congress. And it looks chaotic from the outside, but the good news is that's only because it's also chaotic on the inside. But there is hope in Congress, and part of that comes in, it's never more important. One member is never more important than they are today. And that's why this election has consequences. We say that all the time, and that matters. You look just last week with the FISA warrant bill, 213 to 213, it tied, and the tie goes to a loss. And so right now, your government has passed a rule that allows them to spy on you without a warrant, and that's because of one vote. So that's why these elections matter, but there's hope because the Republican conference is sticking more and more together. You've seen that behind the scenes, and you've seen that play out on the House floor. And when we get the White House back, when we get the Senate, and we have the House next year, the Republican Congress is poised and ready to do significant things to make America great again and to bring the country back. And so while it's chaotic and we have problems, there is hope.
Thank you. Mr. Crane?
Yeah, I would think it's interesting to note that by design, our legislative bodies are designed to be in tension. There's always competing interest, and we see that in any situation. And so to expect it to be like a kumbaya moment, that's not what we should expect. Going into it, we know that there's competing interest, and the goal is to find the common ground that we all share, and then find the dialogue to work around that and move forward on the issues that are of most importance to us, like the border right now, or the inflation that we're all suffering under, and just long-term economic growth for our nation. We've worked through those things by design, by finding common ground, and I think there's great opportunities for that. There's 19 seats just like this across the nation, right-leaning, conservative-leaning seats that I think will add to the number and give us better tools to work with in D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Gray.
Our next question starts with Mr. Jack, and we're going to talk a little bit about the budget, but specifically the U.S. debt. Talk about that from that through that prism. There are lots of estimates out there about the size of the current U.S. debt, though most agree it exceeded the United States gross domestic product in 2020. It is set to do so again in the coming years. According to the Congressional Budget Office, ongoing U.S. Annual deficits would total $1.6 trillion in fiscal year 2024, grow to $1.8 trillion, return to $1.6, but by and large continue to grow steadily thereafter unless spending is changed. What is your view of U.S. deficit spending and debt? What challenges are before us as a nation? And what steps, if any, would you favor in balancing the national budget?
Well, first and foremost, when it comes to our national deficit, it is a national security crisis for us, right? We have a ballooning deficit that, by the way, at this point, you've got an interest. The interest alone on our debt exceeds our military budget and our military spending. We have to rein in government spending. It's one of the three things we can do to fight inflation. We need to unleash America's energy reserves. God has given us abundant resources. You've got coal in Appalachia, you've got liquid gold under our feet. We've got to do everything we can to unleash American energy. We've got to deregulate, but we also have to rein in government spending. One way you can do that is you can elect a Congress that does not budge when a crisis is manufactured and they say, you've got to do this, you've got to fund that, something has to happen, you've got to be strong, and you've got to elect a Congress that is determined to balancing the budget. And I will also say, under President Trump's administration, we did everything we possibly could to grow and unleash our economy. We need to do that again when he's in office. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Singleton.
We've got to get the debt under control. It's a national crisis, and you iterated that extremely well. What you have to do is you have to first elect Congress people that represent the people of the district. So your congressman can't represent the President of the United States, they can't represent the leadership in the House, and they certainly can't be trying to get a leadership position or chairmanship. It's important that your members remember that their job is to represent the people of the district that are sitting under Congress. And you have to have members that have the courage to vote against bad budgets. And by the way, for the viewers, it can be a bad budget even if it comes from a Republican president. It can be a bad budget if it comes from a Democrat. As a state legislator, I voted against several Republican budgets. It wasn't very popular, but they exceeded the inflationary growth, and they were not giving the tax money. We had additional revenue that wasn't going back to the taxpayers. And it's important as fiscal conservatives that we don't just say that on the campaign trail. We have to represent that when we're up there and we're voting. So you have to have the courage to do that, and that's a very difficult thing to find, and a difference that I make in this race.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Crane.
Yeah, obviously the deficit is just the elephant in the room for the future of our country. It's easy to borrow and print money, or they seem to think it is, and steal it from our future, but we've got to stop doing that. There's two ways to help deal with the budget and the deficit that comes from these out-of-control budgets. One, we need to be more specific in how we write our spending bills. The recent bill, H.R. 815, that came out through the House and the Senate, I think went to the President for signature, is full of line items of $200 million here, $500 million here, $5 billion here, with very little emphasis on how that money is to be spent. We have to be more specific. As a builder, I know how to run a budget, I know how to deliver a project on time, and I know how to make sure it comes in under budget. There's two ways you can work on the budget. A penny saved is a penny earned, and that means don't spend it, and you then have it. And so we can move in a direction that will say, in the long term, you don't have to bend the needle far, but we can start moving in a direction where we can see the deficit disappear and we start having a balanced budget.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Dugan.
Thank you. One of the things that's really good about Georgia and how we do business is we do balance the budget each year. It's a zero-based budget process where you come in and zero everything out and build anew. The glory of that is when it's done, when that process is done, goes through both chambers, both committees, and both the floor votes, you have what you're spending your money on in the state in one budget that you can look at all the numbers in one place. The federal government hasn't done that in a long time. When you talk about any young person out there that is just getting started, a couple in their lives, and they can't figure out where their money's going, you say, well, let me see your budget. And if they don't have one, that's a clear indicator that they're not capturing where the money's going. We're doing that as a nation right now. All these little particular spending bills that they put out there, instead of putting them out in one or even a couple, but not little bitty individual bills. So that's, if you want to get under control, know where it's going.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Mr. Jack.
Yeah, again, I'll just close by saying we've got to have a balanced budget. Every single person in this room has to balance your own checkbook. Every single person in this room that is a business owner has to do what you can to ensure that you protect your business owners and the employees that work for you. So we need a balanced budget in our country, and you've got to elect members of Congress that are willing to go up there and stand strong. It doesn't matter what crisis is manufactured, you have to stand strong in determination of your view. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Singleton, rebuttal?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll rebut. Look, the Congress is doing it this year. You know, you've got to be willing to say no and vote no on any budgets. We've passed omnibuses and minibuses, and we're passing them on suspension. So we're passing them with more Democrat than Republican voters. You got to have the courage to say no, and you got to have people that are willing to say no to leadership and willing to say no to the president and say, no, we're not going to greenlight your package. And that's why it's so important to send people to Congress that have proven time and again that they represent the people. And it's easy to stand here at a microphone and say no. Just look at the record. Who's actually said no when it was difficult? And that's hard to find.
Rebuttal, Mr. Crane.
Very good. It's like tennis around here, back
It
and
is.
forth. As a budget chairman in the Senate, during very difficult times, some of us kind of forget, in the downturn in 2008, 2009, 2010, as the economy came down, the budget shrank by over 20% at the state level. 20%. And we were able to deliver to Georgians everything that they needed without missing a beat. We can do that, but it comes from just being a disciplined spender at that level, and I was able to be a part of that as a chairman of a budget subcommittee.
Mr. Dugan.
Yes,
rebuttal?
not calling my senator comrade out on this, but this is not like a tennis match. It's more like pickleball with our age group. So, sorry, it's too easy. Yeah, it is. That's why we're in there together. Yeah, talking about the balanced budget we had here in Georgia, there is more to it than just saying no. You've got to figure out where's the most appropriate. You got to figure out what the impacts it's going to have. You got to go through the entire gamut and find out a real solution, find a real solution where you can actually accomplish what you want to do to reduce the debt. But just saying no all the time is not the answer. All that gets you is stagnation.
All right. This next question is about our local post office. Our local post office facility in Palmetto has recently come under fire for its failure to perform the seemingly basic functions regarding ensuring timely mail delivery. What, if elected, should residents expect from you in finding a solution to this ongoing issue with our post office?
So it's not actually a recent problem. The post office has been suffering woes for a very long time. Actually, the entire Georgia delegation just signed on a letter to address the issue to the Postmaster General. So the simple solution is privatize it. The simple solution is get rid of government subsidized mail, and we can do it significantly more efficiently. Part of the problem is the way it's like the CBDC, it's the way it's funded, so it's self-perpetuating. And this is the problem with government. You'll find that government is a self-licking ice cream cone. So it creates problems, and then they create working groups and focus groups to solve the problems that they created. They create solutions that actually cause more problems. Post office is a great example of that. So you have to be willing to go in there and have to have the courage to make the small changes that actually will solve the problem. And the post office is not an easy fix. I mean, Palmetto is affecting the entire state of Georgia. And it's local post offices that are having problems too. So it's a significant impact, and it's actually directly affecting commerce for the state of Georgia. It's extremely harmful.
Thank you, Mr. Nick. Mr. Crane.
You know, the interesting thing is, if you look at the Constitution, the post offices are actually addressed inside the Constitution. There's a very limited number of things that the federal government ought to be doing, and running the post office is not one of them. What it did say in the Constitution was that the federal government should establish post offices and post roads. It didn't say it should run them from then on out. If Elon Musk can deliver satellites better than we can deliver mailers in a campaign, I think we know that the answer to anything is less government, more free market enterprise, and we're going to end up with a better solution. I think it's obvious to everyone the way forward for making our delivery of our mail more efficient.
Thank you, Mr. Crane.
I think it's going to be one of those where you have to see everybody's got about the same opinion on it. I had a great answer. It's being mailed to me. I'll have it to you in 3 weeks. When we're talking about the post office, it's not just a lateness in a letter. There are people that are dependent upon this. If they mail back in their insurance, if they mail back in their water bill, there's a litany of them, and they're getting their services discontinued because of an inactivity in our postal system. We can't continue with that, and if they can't fix it, then we're going to have to look at another method, and I think privatization is the way we're going to have to go.
Thank you. Mr. Jack.
So I had the privilege, while working for President Trump, of working with him, I should say, to appoint Louis DeJoy as our Postmaster General. And to Philip's point, many members of Congress and the delegation have submitted a letter doing what they can to hold the Postal Service accountable. And I think that's a broader thing that we should look at when we look at federal government. We should hold our federal government accountable. We should hold our civil servants accountable. It is very difficult. You've got very powerful unions that do everything they can to make it very challenging for people to hold our civil servants accountable. It is a privilege to serve our country. If you're a civil servant, you're serving our country. But at the same time, if you're not getting the job done, you've got to do everything you can. We need to do everything we can to make sure they're held accountable. And to your point, we have to cut through red tape. And I look at Tyrone. The Tyrone post office burned probably a year ago, and it's still not built. We've got to accelerate that. We've got to do everything we possibly can to hold our government accountable. Every single one of us should demand more from our government officials and our civil servants, and I will gladly do that in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jack.
Talk a little bit about foreign policy, if I could, and I think we're going to start with Mike Crane on this question. This week, the United States Senate passed 79-18 4 bills, which had in turn been passed by the House of Representatives on Saturday. This is a $95 billion aid package, mostly of military aid, for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, and U.S. partners in the Indo-Pacific. What is your view of this aid package, and more broadly, what is your view on the U.S. support, military support specifically here, of Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan?
So obviously, there's no doubt that what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in Israel, what's going on in Southeast Asia and the Pacific Rim are very important to all of us here in the United States. But what's more important, and this is where we've got to start learning to set our own priorities, what's more important is the invasion that's coming across our borders right now. From the north, from the south, from the sea, from the air, we are being invaded across the land. And so I think the way we address anything is we get our priorities straight first and we take care of that. So number one, we have to deal with the invasion that's currently happening. We've got to close the borders, and then we can take up some of these issues that are pressing around the world. There's no way we can keep the world safe if we're not safe in our own hometown.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Dugan.
Yeah, I was glad to see that we are starting to address the southern border because it is an issue. We have I don't want to call it an obligation, but we do have a history of supporting our allies. Now, just dumping money on pallets in a given area is not the way to do it. I saw that in Iraq, and it was just yeah, you're just throwing money away. But we did other things after the end of World War II along the Lend-Lease plan. And I have been advocating for a while now to continue to support the Ukraine, but do it more along the Lend-Lease model rather than just a contribution to their self-defense. Israel's a little bit different in my mind. It has been our strongest ally in their region of the world since 1948 when they first came about. And I look forward to our continued support with that nation. Taiwan is a buffer for what I would consider our most extreme threat in the world right now, which would be China.
Mr. Jack.
Well, I understand, to the viewers at home, I understand your frustration. You see a lot of money going out the door to foreign countries, and you see a wide open border at home that's jeopardizing and imperiling our communities and our neighborhoods. I spent 4 years of my life working to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship, and I can tell you, working with President Trump and his administration, we accomplished extraordinary things. On day one, he withdrew from the Iran deal. We recognized the Golan Heights, and we made our world a safer place. Peace through strength is something we should always approach. As it relates to Ukraine, I'm concerned because invariably for the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of money go out the door, and I'm not sure what result we're getting. Again, I think we have to demand accountability. If a dollar is going out the door, certainly across our oceans, we have to ensure that we maintain and stress accountability. Accountability is something's missing in government today. We need to elect a member of Congress and a Congress as a whole that demands accountability from our government. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Singleton.
All right, complex foreign policy in 60 seconds. Here we go.
Exactly.
All right, first of all, to correct the record, it passed in the House first, it passed in the Senate second, and it came as a modified rule. So there were 4 bills that were lumped together. They passed in the House with more Democrats than Republicans. It actually passed in the House with more Republican no's than Republican yeses, and that's extremely significant. It went to the Senate, and the same scenario played back out again. Only slightly more Republicans voted for it, but it still passed with a majority Democrat. So that should never happen in a Republican Congress with a Republican in the House of Representatives. Secondly, you know, I've got a master's degree in international relations, and more importantly, I've served overseas for over 7 years of my life, and so this is personal to me. I've lived that. American interventionism is a failed policy. But we also need to understand, you can say that American taxpayer dollars shouldn't be going to these foreign entities, these foreign wars, and that can be true. You can also say that you don't want Vladimir Putin to take over Ukraine. That can also be true. So there's a false narrative in politics right now that says you have to be for one or for the other. Foreign policy is much more complicated than we could talk about in 60 seconds. But Putin should lose, and American taxpayer dollars need to serve Americans.
As you pointed out and others pointed out, that is an awful lot to bite off and chew in 60 seconds. So let's see if we need an extra 30 seconds or so. I don't know if that'll help tremendously. But would you have a rebuttal of Mr. Crane? I believe we started with Mr. Crane. Is that right?
I think we covered it.
Did we? Mr. Dugan, would you like a rebuttal?
I'm not sure you can add much more in 30 seconds.
I get it. I get it. If so, we'll move on to our next question.
All right, thanks. In the role of U.S. Rep, you deal with numerous issues. In your opinion, what is one of the greatest issues facing our constituents presently, and what would be your strategy to deal with it?
Ooh. There's a 30,000-foot view and the local view. One of at the local view, what you hear when I'm going across the district is transportation infrastructure, affordable housing, and that, when I mean that, workforce housing, making sure that we have medical care that's is not just accessible, but it's got to be quality too. So you hear that when we're going across the district on these are the issues at home. When you're looking at the DC level, we're looking at stuff with the border, and I'm not even talking about just the amount of people coming across, not the 8.8 million over the last 3 years. You talk to any of your law enforcement in the community, they're going to talk about a fentanyl issue. A vast majority of that fentanyl that's entering the United States is infecting us here on our streets at home is coming across that border. So when we're saying shut down the border, it is not just a humanitarian issue that we're trying to address with our nation and keeping our border safe, but it's also a local safety issue here at home. So you got the big 30,000 foot and the local, let's talk about it over the kitchen table issues.
Thank you. Mr. Jack.
Yeah, I think the 2 most pressing issues without question are the border and our economy. And we see that every single day when you see the images of folks running across the border, trampling border guards. It is a crisis that affects not just Texas, but also our district here at home. And I think when we elect the next Congress, when we, God willing, elect President Trump, we can work hand in glove with him to secure our border. I did that with him during his administration, and I would be honored to do that for our district going forward. But I also think, as it relates to the economy, our district is very unique. You see almost every week another company moving into our congressional district. You saw Remington move in. You saw Freyr Battery, $2.6 billion investment into our community. That's in large part due to the work of people in this room, your College and Career Academy, training students at the young high school level to be the employees that we want to incentivize businesses to come hire. It's an incredible thing that this community has accomplished, and it's all around the district. We in Georgia are a great place for business development, and as your next congressman, I would be honored to continue that trend.
Thank you. Mr. Singleton?
All right, I'm going to give you the top 3 issues that face us. They're debt, debt, and debt. And then I'll give you a bonus 4th one in a little bit. Don't worry, it's not debt. But let's talk about debt first. So our national debt is unsustainable. We're about 15 years away from the interest on our national debt exceeding revenue for the federal government. That's completely unsustainable. So everyone that's worried about their health care, their Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, that goes away in 15 to 20 years. And we can't keep kicking the can hoping that it just fails under the next president. And you hope it's not your president, because then you can blame the other side. That's just not that's not bad leadership, that's just not leadership. So the debt is something that absolutely has to get under control. And as a state legislator, that's why I voted against bad budgets. And you have to send someone to Congress that understands the difference between the budget process, the appropriations process, and the authorizations process. And that's important to know, and I'm ready day one. The bonus one for you guys is the border, is making sure that immigration policy is reformed. That's the legal immigration policy and illegal immigration. As a legislator, I always say, check the record. I sponsored the Georgia Anti-Sanctuary City Bill. I wrote something. And if my bill had passed, then Lake and Riley would be alive today. It's important that you don't just talk in the campaign trail. You have to do something about it.
Thank you. Mr. Gray?
So in the context of the question, as a representative at the federal level, the question is, what role would the federal government play in helping any of the issues that might present themselves here in the 3rd District? The beauty of the 3rd District is it is a thriving, growing area for the most part. People are coming here, businesses are coming here, and one of the greatest needs where the federal government would be concerned is that transportation, that interconnectivity, the road development. We all know, if you live here in Coweta County, that the roads have not kept up with the growth that we're experiencing here. So I think that's going to be a key place where the federal government can lean in and make sure that the federal highway system is as robust as it can be, and that the state has the resources necessary to support the state road structure here. This is going to be very important to us. Digitally, in the internet space, we need to have digital security. We need to make sure that that is all available at its most robust arena. And then we also need to make sure that in going into the future, that our energy independence is secured. That's going to be a big thing for our district in particular, our state in general. We're already running behind on megawatt capacity for future growth, and we need to address that very specifically because that'll impact every one of us.
Thank you.
We're going to change up our format just a bit, I think, if that's all right. Each candidate, by the way, up here tonight, they were given the opportunity to complete a general information questionnaire ahead of this forum, and the responses are available on the Chamber website and accessible through the Newnan Times Herald website. Well, we're going to take this next segment and talk about some of the answers that y'all gave on that. And what we'll do is actually go to each one of you and ask a little bit. We've sort of summarized what some of those answers are. These are the things I think that you said are most important to you, and just really ask you to expound on them. In the interest of fairness, what we'll then do is we'll take a minute to do that for the candidate that we're talking about, and then I'll go and ask if there's a rebuttal to that or some addendum to that for 30 seconds for each of the candidates not being called on. But we'll start with you, Mr. Jack, if we could. That questionnaire asks you to, all of you, to list the greatest need in Coweta County that is for Coweta County to continue its prosperity. You mentioned continued law and order, continue patriotic education in schools, both public and private, keeping property taxes and taxes generally low. And of course, if y'all disagree with the way we've summarized these, please correct me. We also asked, by the way, if elected, what do you want your greatest accomplishment to be during your term of office? And you, Mr. Jack, mentioned securing the U.S.-Mexico border, ending illegal immigration in all forms, and advancing President Trump's America First agenda. Could you expand on some of those points?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, if elected to serve the people of this district, again, I think Philip summarized this best before, actions speak louder than words. When I served President Trump, I kept my head down and did everything I possibly could to move his agenda forward. That's the type of congressman that I want to be, somebody that puts their head down and gets stuff done. To your point, here in Coweta, you know, most people, I'm a big history guy, most people probably know at the turn of the last century, Newnan, I should say, had more millionaires per capita than any place in America. This has always been the economic driver and engine of our area, and certainly this congressional district. And I think as we go forward, one of the things Coweta can continue to do is invest in its education system, what I saw having toured the College and Career Academy was transformational. It was the first of its kind in Georgia, and it was started by some of the folks in this room and certainly some of the people that are watching on TV at home. It was an idea. You had an idea. You want to bring business development into your community. You want to create jobs. You went about creating a very revolutionary way for students to learn, and I think we should all be proud of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would you have a rebuttal to any of that, Mr. Singleton?
Yeah,
Or
I wouldn't
addendum?
call it a rebuttal.
Addendum.
But 30 seconds on those two topics. So for the district, you know, I represented Coweta and Fayette County in the State House. It's very personal to me. I was able to fight for these things. Workforce development is extremely important in Coweta County right now. We got a great sheriff. Linwood's the best sheriff in the country. So law and order is always important, but workforce development would be what I would focus on local level. As far as what I'd like to be known for, you know, I'd love to solve debt, but Congress has 435 members and 100 in the Senate, so that's not a solo achievement. So I'd love to just remind people that statesmanship's not dead. You can be fiercely conservative and also treat other people like a gentleman and be someone that is respected by your peers. I don't think those two things have to be in contrast.
Thank you, sir. And just a reminder, by the way, we're going to go to each one of your questions as we get to them, but playing off of Mr. Jack's response, Mr. Crane, would you have additional comments you'd like to make in response to Mr. Jack? No, sir. All right. Mr. Dugan, there we go then.
All right. Mr. Dugan, you had mentioned that based on conversations with local elected officials, transportation, affordable housing, and a reduction of unnecessary barriers to job growth is one of the greatest needs in the area. Care to expand on that?
I think those are pretty straightforward, and that is not a Coweta County specific issue. You go across the district, across the state, you're going to hear a lot of those same topics coming back up. Now, affordable housing, and when I say that, everybody always thinks we're talking about Section 8. No, I'm talking about housing that a young couple, two teachers, a law enforcement a teacher, somebody that is the bedrock of our community, that's affordable to them. Now, you have to have that. You have to have the transportation infrastructure, and transportation infrastructure is not just rail, it's not just roads anymore, but it's also broadband. Sorry, brain cramp there for a second. Broadband on that, because that's as important to some of these industries right now as roads and rail and air. And then the third one is we have created a regulatory burden that I've worked on for the last 2 years when I was in the Senate to reduce that across the state to get back to being able to operate the way businesses are intended to operate.
Thank you. Expand on that, Mr. Crane?
No, I thought it was my turn next to you guys.
If so, I'll go ahead and jump in. Okay. Mr. Crane, you indicated, among the things you indicated, greatest need for Coweta to continue its prosperity, selective or more selective development, infrastructure to stay ahead of growth, friendly environment for businesses and families, and the accomplishment you hope for to secure the blessings of liberty for our children and our grandchildren. Please expand.
Amen, right? To secure the blessings of liberty for the future generations. That's the job of any elected officials, and I would say well done if that was the direction this nation was going in at that time. The budget deficit would disappear, the debt clock would be running in the reverse direction it currently is now. People would feel safe in their homes, they could afford the life that they dreamed of, in the home that they dreamed of, in the community that they dreamed of. The federal government is currently at odds at all of that, and that has to stop. That's why it's important that this election is just as maybe the most important election in Georgia this year. This is the one opportunity in the entire state that we can send somebody, a builder with a plan instead of a politician with an agenda, or somebody that thinks the 3rd District is a stepping stone to greater political activity instead of the cornerstone of what makes this nation great.
Thank you. Mr. Singleton, in your card, you said one of your greatest needs, you already kind of touched on this, was investments in well-developed and thoughtfully planned infrastructure, facilities for workforce development and growing population, expansion of a post-secondary career, technical, and agriculture education program. My question is, in a federal role, how can you best address the need for making sure that our district receives the adequate funds for infrastructure?
Yeah, so I love that you asked the second part of the question, because it's actually what nobody's talking about is the elephant in the room, which is the very first question that a federal legislature needs to talk about is the 24 enumerated powers given to Congress in the Constitution, and making sure that we're staying in line with Article 1. And so a lot of times the federal government, the best thing the federal government can do is get out of your way. And a great example would be Department of Education. You know, that 7 to 12% of funding that's coming from the federal government with all those nice strings attached to make sure that you behave the way that they want you to behave. And it what aligns education in Arizona with education in Georgia when there's almost no educational outcomes that are in common. So you got to be able to cut those organizations like getting rid of the Department of Education to make sure you can bring it back to the state level and let the decision makers make those decisions. So infrastructure is one of those great things that commerce and interstate commerce is an important role of the federal government. So making sure that we invest in those heavy cost, those very expensive regional projects that are heavy in infrastructure cost and that the burden share, they help a regional impact. Those are things that are good things that are constitutional that the federal government can do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Well, gentlemen,
At this time, I think we'd like to invite you to have any closing thoughts at this moment. Mr. Dugan, would you like to begin?
2 minutes.
2 minutes each, please.
Okay. So thank you everybody for being here and those that are watching at home. One of the things I want to talk about is this group of people and Jim, who's not here tonight. They're all good people, and this is not new to them. They've heard me brag on them multiple times before when we've been at different events across the district. They're all great conservatives. You'll hear people that will say, well, this one's not as conservative as that one. What I've seen is they're all great conservatives. So then what's the difference between us? There's one in this race that has actually accomplished the things that stood in front of prospective voters and said, if you elect me, I will get this done. There's only one of us in this room that has gotten bills across the finish line that significantly changed parts of our nation's life. We talked about the CEC here a little while ago. And remember, a little while back, we created the dual enrollment bill, which increased accessibility to the technical college system of Georgia. That was my bill. So when we're looking at things that cover the entire spectrum of our lives, from education to health care, to you getting your income tax returns, having pay less in, get them back quicker, to having a secure election. I'm the only one in this race that has actually done that. So when it comes to May 21st, and I'm going to stop early on that 30-second flash there. When it comes to the election on May 21st, I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jack.
Yeah, to Mike's point, I think one of the privileges of running in this race, we get a chance to get to know each other and get to know our communities and talk to our communities and learn what matters most to them. And I think, as we said before, the most important thing we can do on day one is we have to secure our southern border, but we've got some ideas to do that. And I think when asking yourself, why do we have a problem at the southern border? For me, I view it as a tool from some that don't necessarily have our country's best interests at heart to add Democrat votes to the voter rolls. One idea that we have, one idea that I have and very, very, very supportive of, is we should mandate proof of citizenship when you go vote. Across this country, you can, as an illegal immigrant, register to vote. That should not happen in our country. You have to be an American citizen in order to vote. We have to destroy the incentivization structure that rewards illegal immigration. I think that's one of the first things we should do. Secondly, on inflation. Every single person that goes to Publix or Kroger or wherever you shop for your food knows and can experience. It's not just every 6 months it's going up 10 cents. More often than not, it's going up $1, $2. How can we fix inflation? We need to unleash America's energy. We need to deregulate, working with President Trump. For every regulation that we put on the books from 2017 to 2021, we peeled back 8 regulations. We've got to do that, and to the earlier point today, we have to rein in out-of-control spending. If we do those 3 things, we can fix inflation. I also think we should look at moving government agencies out of Washington, D.C. It was an idea we had in the Trump administration, and we did it. We moved one of the big agencies within the Department of the Interior out of D.C. into Colorado, and guess what? Because the results were so successful, the Biden administration yanked it back to D.C. To Mike's point, it's a little unorthodox in a campaign, but we have some wonderful people running in this race. Philip flew helicopters into combat. Mike put on the uniform of an Army Ranger, and Mike, at the end of the table, served our community with dignity in the state Senate. I worked for President Trump for the last 8 years of my life, and that's the exact type of commitment you'll get from me if you elect me on May 21st. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's nothing more frustrating. First of all, thanks for everyone being here and online, and thanks for joining us. There's nothing more frustrating than electing representatives and then they get to Washington and they don't do anything they said they're going to do. It's baffling still that we have a 98% reelection rate for Congress and about a 12% approval rating. And that's why results matter. That's why when you get up here in a campaign and you hear the same answer, you know, not to quote old movies, but show me the money, right? Show me the record. And that's why records matter, and records are extremely important. We talked about, you know, when I launched the Save Girls Sports effort in 2019, we've passed that now, that version of my bill in 24 states. That's a record of achievement. And we're not going to stop until we've passed it in all 50 states, that we protect girls and make sure that Title IX is protected, which Biden is attacking every day now because of our successes. You know, we talk about illegal immigration. That's why I physically wrote the Georgia Anti-Sanctuary City Act, which would have saved Laken Riley's life. And these things are important, that you have a record of achievement. It's very easy to talk about things on a campaign trail, but you have to actually be able to do something that actually solves the problem. That's why I launched the State Freedom Caucus Network 2 years ago. We're in 11 states now, and the Freedom Caucus Network across this country is being transformative in state legislatures. It's making sure that the conscience of the party has a voice in the process so that the establishment can't win. And that's the real challenge for the voters, is to make sure you go out there and you don't let someone buy your vote. You've got to be educated and engaged and look at the record of achievement. It's not enough to say you believe in something. Where did you put, what's your sweat equity? What did you do to achieve results in that? Election integrity is another example. That was an important thing in Georgia. Election integrity has been under attack. And why there are people running around crying about election integrity all of 2020, I'm the only state legislator that filed the lawsuit against the state of Georgia to try to make sure that we secured our elections. Results matter, and people that actually do things matter. So I'm an Army soldier, an American warrior. I hope to have your vote. I've earned your confidence, and I've proven it over time. Go to singletonforcongress.com, and it'd be an honor to serve you.
Thank you. Mr. Grant.
Well, thank everyone for joining us today and just getting a chance to get introduced to all of us. You know, 41 years ago when we came, Tracy and I met and our lives began and we started building our young lives and didn't know where it would bring us. The world was not so different back then, actually. Think about what it was like in 1980. Inflation was out of control. Fuel prices were out of control. The Middle East was on fire. The Iranians were holding Americans hostage. The communist threat was a menace to the entire world and growing. But something happened. Something happened in 1980 that changed the entire course of this country. One election made the difference. Ronald Reagan got elected, and all of that began to change. And my petition to each of you, as you look at this is one of those elections. We can change the trajectory in Washington, D.C. if we quit sending folks to Washington, D.C. that do not represent us, don't live with us, don't weep with us, don't suffer with us, don't live here in the district and do what we do each and every day. As a builder, we have built things our entire life. We build things that last. I've never started a project that I have not finished. That's the task at hand. I don't get one job in D.C. and then go look for the next job. I don't get a job with this group and then go look for the next job. I don't get elected to serve in the Senate and then quit to go run for Congress. I finish every job I start. I'll be faithful to that promise. I'll be faithful to you. I'll be faithful to the 3rd District. I'm Mike Crane. I'm asking for your support so that I can be your actual, true representative in Washington, D.C. instead of letting Washington, D.C. pick our next representative. Go to craneforcongress.com and find out more. And don't wait till May 21st to make your decision on who you need to send. Go April 29th or as soon as possible and vote then. I don't care what you do on May 21st after that. Vote Mike Crane, and let's get America back on track. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, that unfortunately brings us to the end of tonight's forum. I know there are probably so many more subjects that we could talk about, but I so appreciate you coming out and sharing your views. I just want to take a moment and express my appreciation to my co-moderator, Clay Neely, and to AT&T, our sponsor, our advocacy sponsor for tonight's forums, and also our Central Educational Center student interns who are filming and placing this on the Chamber website, accessible also through the Times-Herald website. People will be able to find these videos and more information about your campaigns right there. And on behalf of the Newnan-Coweta Chamber of Commerce, I want to thank each one of you for coming tonight and for standing and running for this very important seat. Gentlemen, I think you did well. Thank you.